So look closely at this, and what do you notice that's kind of different about this from a standard scroll? Notice anything happening here? Okay, so the thing that's different is this top plate, or the top scroll, is going up and coming down, going up and coming down. Okay, a standard scroll compressor doesn't do that. The plates are always engaged. Okay, so what the VCC does is when it wants less capacity, it brings the top plate up a little bit. I don't know how much, but it's a very small amount. When the top plate is up, the compressor is not doing any compression. It's doing no work on the refrigerant. Okay, and I'll show you in the next slide, I'll show you the sequence of how that works. Now, the important thing to note here is when the compressor's on, which is pretty much all the time, that the motor is spinning at a constant speed. The motor speed does not change. What changes the capacity is the engaging and disengaging of the scroll plates. Okay, that's what really makes it different than the variable speed compressor. Okay, so here's how it works. The compressor controller breaks up the loading in 15-second increments. So from here to here, it's 15 seconds. Now let's say you were in a scenario where you needed half of the load. You're starting to overcool the space. You're pulling back on the compressor, to give you less capacity. And it's determined the controller wants the compressor to be at 50%. What happens is it pumps for 7.5 seconds, and it disengages or does not pump for 7.5 seconds. Okay, so it would repeat that until it needed to change the capacity. So it would be pumping for 7.5, off for 7.5, on for 7.5, off for 7.5. Okay, until it needed more capacity or less. So let's say we needed 80% capacity. Okay, it's getting hotter outside. There's 100 people in the building now, etc. It's determined it needs to be 80% loaded. Well, then it pumps for 12 of the 15 seconds, and it's off for 3 of the 15 seconds. Make sense? Now you would think, or at least I thought when I first saw this, that, well, the temperature is when I graph the temperature, it's gonna go like this. I'm gonna see these spikes. It's so infinite that you can't see any of that. And it's amazing how close, I'd say less than a half a degree, once it stabilizes, it can control your discharge air temperature, your discharge air set point. So, okay, not only is that important from a controllability standpoint, but from an energy usage standpoint, you can see on the left here, this is your power usage, percent of your power usage. So no power, 100% power, percent of full load capacity here. So 10% capacity in full capacity. And then you have your digital scroll line, this blue one here, and then your hot gas, comparing it to hot gas bypass, okay? So let's say, for example, you're at 50% loading, which is right here, okay? You can see the digital is using 60% of the full load power, whereas hot gas bypass is almost using 100%. So why at 50% is the digital scroll using 60% of the power? Why is it not 50%? Anyone want to guess? When you show this slide to an engineer, you're probably going to get asked that question. That's because when the plates are disengaged, you're still using power to turn the motor. Okay, so another Copeland product, VFD compressor. Again, these are both standard configurable. So variable speed compressor, modulating scroll compressor, inverter compressor, VFD compressor. These are kind of terms used in the industry for really the same thing. And we're going to look at this Emerson unit I only have 2 slides on this, but real quick. But there are other modulating compressors. Like if you have a VRF line, you have an inverter compressor probably in that product, right? I have an LG, ductless split up here. It's got an inverter compressor, but this specifically is a VFD driven compressor by Copeland. So what makes this different? You can see the scroll plates up here, and see the motor changing speed. Now, it wouldn't erratically change speed like that in the field. It's going to slowly ramp up and slowly ramp down. I think this image is just like that to kind of catch your attention. Okay, but here the scroll plates don't engage and disengage. They're always engaged. You're just changing the speed of the motor. Okay, a few accessories you need when you're using this compressor is you need an electronic expansion valve as opposed to a thermal expansion valve. So there's some expense there. You also have a true VFD, an external drive, and then you'll have a separate controller that's used to control this product, okay? Pretty simple. So when do I use which one, right? This is going to be a confusing thing when you first start. They both got pros and cons, right? The variable speed option is quieter, especially at part load. If you heard that digital compressor cha-chung when it was doing its loading and unloading, that was a small one. If you get like a 20-ton unit, it can get loud depending on where the unit is. If you know it ahead of time and you prepare, it's usually not a problem. But just keep that in mind. Acoustics is something to pay attention to. A variable speed compressor is more efficient than a VCC compressor. VCC compressor is still a huge efficiency gain over on-off, but it is more efficient, variable speed compressor. They're more expensive. Variable speed compressors are more expensive, so you can pay more and get the efficiency. They're a little more complicated. You know, I used to call on a rural school board in Florida, and I wanted it to be as simple as possible. So they were getting the VCC compressor, which is pretty bulletproof, pretty easy, doesn't have an external drive. You get what I'm saying? So all these factors come into play. There was one other thing. Oh, the other thing is the turndown. Now, this information might be dated. I need to find out. But the turndown of the variable capacity compressor is 10%. I'm pretty sure that's correct. I'm not sure what the variable speed compressor is. I think the last time I saw it, it was 25 to 30%. That could be dated. Keep that in mind, because that could be a big issue. And the other thing about these compressors is whenever you change the speed of the compressor, or even with the VCC, when you're changing the capacity, there are oil return concerns. Okay, we're not even talking about split systems here. We're just talking about package units. But they do have what's called a flush cycle. So every 15, 20 minutes, I don't know what the exact number is, they will go to close to 100% to flush the oil back into the system. Now, is that a problem? No, probably not on 99% of your jobs. But I had a coworker who had a job that when it did the flush cycle, it fluctuated up a few degrees, and it was a very extremely tight temperature control in a pharmaceutical lab. So, you know, these are just the things you'll learn as you go forward. But anyway, that's the deal. Okay.